Hey, welcome back everybody to the review of the week number 7 Redshirt Sports Top 25 here in the 2025 college football season, where we are going to take a deep dive into the top 25 here in this episode that just came out on Redshirt Sports yesterday, as well as previewing the top games in the country. We are going to have 4 top 25 matchups that we're also going to preview as well, so it is going to be an action-packed video here today that I hope you guys enjoy as we get closer to the start of week number 7. The first week that we do actually see more midweek action, games starting on Wednesday. So very exciting time to be live from that perspective. So much to go ahead and jump into here tonight. Taking a look at what that college football playoff field would look like hypothetically as well. So again, you're not going to want to miss a single thing. Find your favorite chair, get yourself comfortable, because man, oh man, we are going to have an extraordinarily fun time here in this episode, man. But before we jump into it, make sure you do a couple of things for me. It only takes a couple of seconds to go ahead and do. Make sure you go ahead, you hit that like button. And then also, you're brand new to the channel, you like what you see here, definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. It's free to do, and it helps grow the channel tremendously. We are going to have a Redzone live stream on Saturday, so you definitely don't want to miss out on that aspect as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So as I mentioned in the past, I am a ballot voter along with about a dozen other people. And this is the first year that the Redshirt Sports Top 25 has in fact existed. And very happy to be a part of this process. But let's now go ahead and jump into what that Redshirt Sports Top 25 looks like, as well as what would that hypothetical playoff field look like if this regular season were to end the game and conference championships were somehow canceled, right? So gonna go ahead, we're gonna throw it up on screen here, right? We are going to go ahead and shoot off that good old-fashioned Redshirt Sports Top 25. So this is what we got going on here, right? So here's the top 25 as of right now. Not a lot of movement, at least outside of the top 5. And then after the top 5, things get extremely chaotic very quickly, right? So we'll get into that in a second. Your top 4 is going to remain relatively the same. Your Ohio State Buckeyes are going to still be the #1 ranked team in the nation. And Ohio State, they've been ranked #1 almost for the entire year outside of week number 1, when Texas actually started off as a preseason #1. Ohio State beat them, and they just have not moved ever since. They had that blowout victory against Minnesota. Miami, they did switch places with Oregon. Miami now moving up to number 2. They are coming off of a 6-point win against Florida State, but don't let the box score fool you. That was a little bit more of a splattering than what the score would lead you to believe. So very convincing win for the Miami Hurricanes as they move up to number 2. Oregon, I believe they were on bye this week. They were coming off of a win against Penn State, which looked really good a couple of weeks ago. You could see here, though, Penn State no longer being ranked. They had that inexplicable loss to UCLA, and now the Nittany Lions, now with 2 losses, one as bad as UCLA. That's why they went from being number 9 in the country all the way out of the top 25 completely. Just a completely inexcusable loss, and Penn State doesn't have any notable wins on their resume either. So that's why Penn State's no longer here. So those 3 teams, they would be getting first-round byes hypothetically. And the 4th team still going to be Ole Miss. Ole Miss looking really good. I believe they were also on bye this past weekend, though. I don't exactly remember who they played precisely, if they played last week, so I do apologize for that. Don't have that in front of me. But Ole Miss would be your 4th and final team, and your highest ranked SEC team right now in the Redshirt Sports Top 25. So that's going to round out your top 4, and these would all be your teams that would receive first round byes, because it's not regardless of whether you're a conference champ or not. It is just comes down to, are you one of the best 4 teams in the country, plain and simple. So that out of the way, let's keep moving through the rest of the top 25. So Number 5 is Oklahoma. They would be the 5 seed, hypothetically. The Oklahoma Sooners. They had a tune-up game against Kent State. Oklahoma, won very comfortably, 44-0. Know that they're going up against probably one of the biggest losers in this top 25, because at least going into last week, Oklahoma had a real resume boosting win, and that has lost a lot of its luster. But it can still be challenging with John Mateer still not playing for his team. Texas defense is still a solid defensive unit. The offense certainly has its inconsistencies at Texas, and it's a rivalry game, so the emotion is going to be there, but the luster and really that resume boosting win that Oklahoma thought they were going to have, that is no longer going to be the case because Texas is no longer ranked. So Oklahoma is chilling here at number 5 for right now. Texas A&M, they're at number 6, the number 6 seed. Oh, and one thing that I also want to mention before I get into Texas A&M, Oklahoma, they would be playing against Memphis. Memphis would be your, they would be getting in by virtue of being that 5th automatic qualifier for conference champions. Memphis right now, the best ranked G5 team in the Redshirt Sports Top 25. They do check in at number 21 in the entire country. So it would be Memphis traveling to play against Norman, Oklahoma. Memphis does have an SEC win, so but we'll see if they have what it takes to go up against a ranked SEC team. Arkansas having a hard time as of right now. So I wanted to get that split note out of the way. Memphis has been dominant though in their matchups outside the Arkansas game, though. That's something I do want to mention. Really good team there at Memphis, Tennessee. Now, going for the rest of the top 25, as I mentioned, Texas A&M, number 6, coming in as of right now. They had a very convincing win against Mississippi State. They're here at number 6, and they would host, actually, who would be your last at-large team to get in at this time? The Missouri Tigers, who do check in at number 11. Missouri's going to have a test against Alabama. They have a real chance to boost that resume. Missouri right now does not have any top 25 victories, which is why, even though they are an undefeated SEC team, that's why they are behind an Alabama and as well as behind a Georgia. Both those teams being a little bit more tested at this time and trusted as well. I think that does partially play into it. So, but Missouri getting some respect. They're on the verge of being in the top 10. They'll have a big game against Alabama, but right now, Missouri would be the 11 seed. They would take on Texas A&M and would be an SEC versus SEC in the first round. The winner would then go on and play Oregon at a neutral site field. At number 7, we do have the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana does have a top 25 win already against Illinois, who checks in at number 19. Blew them out by 50 points, and I still think 7 is a little low for Indiana. I think this is a top 5 outfit, personally. They would be hosting the Georgia Bulldogs in a hypothetical playoff game, which I think would be very interesting, just with Georgia being this traditional blue blood, while Indiana, the up-and-comer, but ironically enough, Indiana would be hosting Georgia right now, which I think is a very interesting thing to see. Georgia having to go up in the cold of wintertime. Indiana got a big game this weekend, taking on Oregon, making that cross-country road trip. I think Indiana should be a top 5 team, and I'm going to say the same thing about this next team that's ranked in the Redshirt Sports Top 25, Texas Tech. Listen, I understand they do have one top 25 win now. Utah, as Utah does check in at number 24, they do bounce back in. I think Utah should have been ranked the entire time, even with what happened to them against Texas Tech. But it is what it is. Utah is back. Texas Tech, they've just been dominating everybody that they went up against, regardless of the level of competition. That is a really good team. They look like a team that actually could mess around and be a title contender with how they're dominating everybody. And I know Josh Pate has taken note earlier this week on his show. They would be hosting Alabama. Alabama now with 2 ranked wins. They were able to bounce back after the very early loss to Florida State. The Florida State loss losing its luster though. But the 2 ranked wins are certainly helping out. Georgia at number 10 and then Vanderbilt at number 20. So Alabama does have 2 ranked wins in their resume with a chance to possibly get a 3rd. But right now, Alabama would be traveling to Lubbock, Texas, for the final first round matchup in the winner of that game, going on and taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes. So that would be your playoff field. So Ohio State, Miami, Oregon, and Ole Miss, they would be your top four. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Indiana, and Texas Tech, they would be hosting first round playoff games. And then 3 more SEC teams having to travel in Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, then Memphis, like having to travel. So an incredible number of teams. The SEC, really the biggest winner in here right now. 3 teams in the top 6. 6 playoff teams right now projected for the SEC. Hope that could change things out. Let's go ahead and take a look around the rest of the top 25. Georgia Tech, they actually moved up quite a bit. They were 18 this time last week. They're now up to number 12 as an undefeated ACC team. I will say this though, I'm a little hesitant to buy in on Georgia Tech. I know they're undefeated. I know they're a really good story. Their best win this year is against Clemson, but the Clemson game lost its luster. I will have to admit that, just because with Georgia Tech and what they're doing right now. So Clemson has 3 losses, and they struggled against Troy. So I have reservations in terms of how good Georgia Tech is. Not to mention the last time that we see them play a couple of weeks ago, they struggled against Wake Forest, and frankly, with the officiating, they honestly should have lost that Wake Forest game. Shouldn't put the outcome of the game in the hands of officials. You could definitely argue that, but at the same time, that does need to be acknowledged. But Georgia Tech, they are at least undefeated, getting close to a bowl eligibility, breakout season possibly for Brent Key and the boys. Though I do want to point that out, and what we thought was a big time win against Clemson at home, that doesn't necessarily mean the case. For Tennessee, they check in at number 13. I believe that they are going up against Arkansas. They're hosting Arkansas at home, so that is a thing that is certainly happening. LSU checks in at number 14. They're hosting South Carolina during the 7:30 window. Michigan, they check in at number 15. Their only loss is to number 5 Oklahoma. And then they're going to be taking on USC on the road. Cross-country road trip. Could be a difficult test for the Michigan Wolverines. We'll see how they handle that moving forward. But in the meantime, and they did, shout out to Michigan, they do jump up 5 spots. They do have the win against Wisconsin. And then a team that they also beat that I think should be ranked as top 25. They were on my ballot, Nebraska. I think Nebraska is a top 25 team. They didn't ultimately make the cut, but I did vote for Nebraska in the top 25. So that's a sneaky, good quality win for the Michigan Wolverines. And they're playing against USC, which I think should also be a top 25 squad in its own right, just based upon the eye test. I'm a real big eye test person, although losses should eventually matter, but we don't subscribe to, like, you are what your record says you are, right? So definitely want to give Michigan a shout out there. At number 16, though, we got BYU, the Cougars, jumping up 6 spots. 6 or 7 spots. I can't read my own handwriting, but BYU, I believe they were either 22 or 23 last week. They jumped up to number 16 in the nation. Again, another undefeated team from the Big 12, playing some really good ball. They've had some run-ins. They looked fine against West Virginia. They didn't look great against West Virginia. And then I think like a week before that, I think BYU had a little bit of a scare. But BYU still undefeated for all intents purposes. They're playing Arizona on the road. And Arizona could be like a sneaky test. Right now on FanDuel, BYU is only favored by 1.5. So that could be a possible trap game for the Cougars. We'll see how BYU handles it. Notre Dame comes in at number 17. They do have 2 losses, but they are against top 5 teams. Or borderline top 5 teams by combined 4 points. They've played extremely well against everybody else that wasn't a top 5 team. So, definitely understand. Notre Dame at number 17. Virginia. How about the Virginia Cavaliers jumping in? Number 18. They weren't ranked last week. They are ranked this week, though. So, shout out to that Virginia squad. I could not think of a better 2 weeks than the Virginia Cavaliers are having right now, right? With beating Florida State at home. It was an emotional win. And then also beating Louisville, who was ranked in this top 25 this time last week. So I guess being the partial cause of getting two teams knocked out of the top 25, that does need to be mentioned. So congratulations to Virginia. And don't look now, Virginia does have a path to go to the ACC title game. So that is something to definitely monitor looking forward. Illinois is in at number 19 in the nation. I did move Illinois back into my personal top 25 as well. They were ranked last week in this poll, but I didn't rank them in my personal ballot because I had a hard time shaking off that 50-point loss. But give all credit in the world to Illinois. They were able to shake back in the last couple weeks, getting that last-second victory against USC, which is USC's only loss, by the way. I do want to point that out. And that's a big reason why I had USC ranked in the first place. And then they also able to play pretty well against Purdue. Purdue, I know is still not very good, but they're at least improved from this time last year, at least as an offensive outfit. And that was a team that gave Illinois a really hard time last year, but Illinois, didn't play with them this year and won pretty convincingly. So they'll have a test against number 1 Ohio State. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Vanderbilt at number 20. They're still ranked, but they now have a blemish on their resume. That is losing to Alabama. It was a winnable game for Vanderbilt. They had a chance to at least make it a 10-0 lead early, but they lost the turnover battle. In losing the turnover battle on the road, that is not a recipe for success. Vanderbilt's still a pretty good team. They had their opportunities to win, and they just couldn't make enough plays. That's really what happened to Vanderbilt. We talked about Memphis at 21. Arizona State at number 22. They're back in. Kind of fell off the radar after the Mississippi State loss, but they got a pretty quality win against TCU, and they haven't lost since. So very happy to see Arizona State back in. USF, they're also ranked in the top 25 once again. They're back in at number 23. Fell off the map a little bit since the blowout loss to Miami, but USF, got to give them credit. They have dominated in their games since then. And that includes the FCS game and beating Charlotte like the way we're supposed to, which no one's gonna sit here and tell you those are good teams, but to USF's credit, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They are dominating the teams they're supposed to dominate, so that does need to be mentioned. USF also has those wins against Florida and Boise State as well. Boise State still one of the better G5 teams in the nation, so that does need to be mentioned. Utah back into number 24. Glad to see you guys back. They shouldn't have left in the first place. And then last but not least, at number 25, we got Iowa State. Well, I still think they're a top 25 team, but definitely understand them moving back a little bit from number 12, which is where they were. I thought they were a little overinflated because they had that close call against Arkansas State, and just like from an eye test perspective, that rubbed me the wrong way. And candidly, even though they did lose, they are still ranked, but I thought 12 was always a little rich. So a little bit of a market correction with them losing to Cincinnati, which Cincinnati not ranked in this top 25, but in terms of the others receiving votes, Cincinnati did receive the most votes / the most points. That did not make the final cut, the final 25 team cut. They have UCF, and I think if Cincinnati beats UCF, we will likely see Cincinnati in this top 25 this time next week. So, yeah, definitely know what your thoughts are of this top 25 down in the comments section down below. And also, before I go into these team previews, man, before I jump into all of that, let me tell you guys this, man. It only takes a couple of seconds to do. First of all, if you made it this far in the video already, you are a real MVP, and I genuinely appreciate that. But in addition as well, right, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button too. It really does help grow the channel tremendously as we we embark on our first full year of covering college football at the national level. And we do some pretty cool things on Saturday as well, and it has something to do with our actual name, right? So that is always appreciated. But now let's get into the meat of it. We got 4 top 25 games happening over the course of this weekend. Why don't we go ahead and take that time and jump into every top 25 matchup that we have from noon into some after dark special type stuff, man. So let's go ahead and start with what we got going in the noon window. All right, then. So let's jump into the first top 25 matchup that we do have in what is an action-packed weekend. How about my Ohio State Buckeyes traveling to take on the number 19th ranked team in the nation in the Illinois Fighting Illini? And for those of you that are watching these smaller like previews, if you want to check out the top 25 that I utilize, that will be listed in the description. But in the meantime, how about this Ohio State team? We probably haven't watched them a ton since the Texas game, right? I mean, I don't blame you. You know, they played Grambling, they played Ohio, they played Minnesota. They really haven't played in any marquee games since that Texas matchup all the way back in late August, early September. But they've been dominating, man, and there's a reason why they're the number one team in the nation, particularly what we saw from them last time out. This Ohio State team is coming in. They were dominant last weekend against Minnesota. A good team, by the way. A quality team. And Ohio State just chewed them up and spit them out in short order. 42-3 was the final score. And Julian Sayin, the scary part is, Julian Sayin is starting to find his footing. 23 for 27. Over 300 yards passing. 3 touchdown passes as well. And we're also seeing these other receivers outside of Jeremiah Smith continue to get fed. I mean, you want to double team Jeremiah Smith? That's completely fine. I got Cornell Tate on the other side. He's been getting some buzz to potentially be a first round pick, right? Like Cornell Tate, he had 100 yards, over 100 yards receiving, 180 yards receiving, had a score, 9 reception as well. But that's not even the biggest strength of this team, guys. This defense has been suffocating. You know, we talked about that red zone defense. Unquestionably, the best red zone defense in the entire country right now. They have not given up a single red zone touchdown the entire season. And that also dates back to last year as well. It's just, that is something that they take pride in terms of making sure that you're at best settling for field goals instead of getting touchdowns, which, you know, leads me to really the underdog on the other side, right, in this Illinois squad. Now, I really want to give Illinois their flowers here in this particular preview, right, because, you know, last time we saw Illinois in a big-time matchup, it was against Indiana, and it was probably one of the more embarrassing games that we've seen any team play over the course of this entire year. You can argue Penn State against UCLA. You can argue UCLA playing against New Mexico. There's a fair share of these, you know, embarrassing losses for programs. But Illinois, give them all the credit in the world, because that was the type of game where they lost so bad that could have really spiraled out of control, and now you're looking up and all of a sudden Illinois could really be struggling to make it to a bowl game, let alone their expectations of, you know, competing for an actual playoff spot. But they've turned it around. They got that last second field goal against USC. And then Purdue last week, they beat Purdue by a couple of possessions. Maybe not as close as what the score said. It was 40-21 at the end of the third quarter. Purdue did chip away at it a little bit, but what I'm saying is the outcome was in hand essentially well before the triple zeros hit on the scoreboard. Shout out to Luke Altmaier as well, you know, looking pretty good in the last matchup. Almost 400 yards passing, had a passing touchdown as well. Is the clear leader of this offense. Can he scale up, though? I think we saw this issue kind of come up against Indiana. He struggled against Indiana, was able to bring himself back on track a little bit for the USC game, where, like, in that USC victory, he did go 20 for 26, 328, 2 touchdowns. He's got to be able to find a way to scale upward and be able to have a big-time performance. So I'm talking about a type of game where QBR, for those that care about QBR, you need Luke Altmaier to be in the 90s. He's going to have to play in a really good game, I think, for Illinois to have a chance to pull this upset at home against the number one team in the nation. Now, he's not necessarily going to be alone. They have a weapon in special teams, and special teams maybe not changing the outcome of games too terribly much. It's not as important as having a good offense or a good defense, but special teams is still incredibly important, and it can definitely help sway games one way or the other. They do have a really good kicker in David Olano, who has in back-to-back weeks now, in the USC game and in the Purdue game as well. He has received Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week honors, and that's someone that's going to need to step up once again as well. And for the defense to step in and make some really good plays, right? Because we thought this defense was, a good defensive outfit, but even in their last couple of wins, they've been inconsistent. And obviously, the Indiana game, what they lost, they haven't looked good. So the defense, they really need to rise to the occasion on this one. I know there's a ton of weapons on that offensive side of the ball. So Ohio State, you got to take something away. At least make Ohio State work for it. You're not going to be able to smother them. That's just not going to happen. But can you at least, when it matters, get those stops on third down, get those stops in the red zone, and be able to at least force them to settle for field goals instead of them constantly getting touchdowns? That's how you're going to be able to pull this out. So I do expect that Ohio State is going to try to pull away early, lean on that running game, and that continual improvement in confidence building in Julian Sayin, so that you have that pass balance. Winning third downs is going to be really important, especially if you're Illinois. And it just really goes to show that if Illinois is going to win this game, they're going to need a mistake-free game. They need a clean game, as well as find ways to get explosive plays, because I think they're not the type of team that I think is going to be able to find consistent success in the red zone against this Ohio State defense. Nobody really has, right? So when we go ahead, I'm going to pull up the model here, let you know what the model thinks, right? So as of me recording this video, so FanDuel has Ohio State as a 2-touchdown favorite, but Illinois, interesting enough, is getting a little bit more love from our internal metrics. Illinois is only listed as a 12.5-point favorite. So I'm just really curious to see what my own model is thinking here, because I could see that my model is definitely a little bit higher than Illinois on the betting markets. But I still think about, in the back of my mind, what happened to them in the Indiana game. I know it was a few weeks ago, and maybe they did shrug that off, but I just can't get that out of my mind, what Indiana was able to do for them. And Ohio State not only is a better team than Indiana, I don't think that is a very controversial opinion at all, but at the same time, I think Ohio State, they may be the most complete team in college football right now. They have shown that they can win in multiple ways, whether it is getting in a rock fight with Texas, or if they need to win a shootout. They don't have to because their defense is really good, but if games turn into shootouts, their offense can score points at will if they need to. I think they prefer to have the more methodical drives, but they've shown that, hey, they can score in a heartbeat. So the defense, which was elite last year, it's somehow better, and the offense is now getting to a point where it can score at will. Like I said, they can win in multiple ways. I think Illinois is a proud football program. I think Brett Vermillion will do everything in his power to get this team ready to go, and Champaign is going to be rocking. That is going to be a really fun environment to watch on Big Ten noon kickoff. But I just have a hard time just Illinois overcoming this Buckeye team with this with just how good this team is. I think it's going to be really hard to overcome, no matter how good the coaching is. Minnesota found this out the hard way, and Illinois is a better team than Minnesota. I think they'll put up a better fight than what Minnesota did last weekend. But I'm going to disagree with the model. I always thought that Ohio State was going to win this game. I really did. But just the fact, I'm surprised that my own model has them covering. I really am shocked. But I think not only does Ohio State win this game, I do think that we are going to see the Ohio State cover. I think 35-17 is going to be the final score. Illinois is going to have their moments. They're going to be able to find their way into the end zone. Shoot, Ohio did find a way to score a touchdown So I'd imagine Luke Altmaier and the talent that they do have, they're going to find a way to find ourselves into the end zone. I don't doubt that. I just don't think that Illinois is going to be able to score nearly enough, or the defense going to be consistently good enough to rise to the challenge and pulling off this win against the #1 team in the nation. So I'm going with Ohio State winning comfortably. Probably 35-17 will be that final score. Now, on the other hand, though, what we might see a much more competitive matchup happen around the same time during the course of the noon window, and that is because number 9 Alabama, they'll be making the field trip to Columbia, Missouri, a team that famously, I guess, gets made fun of for, I guess, being an awkward fit in terms of the culture of the SEC. But make no mistake, this Missouri team, very good in its own right, currently undefeated, sitting at 5-0 right now. They only have one SEC game that they played in. They had a solid non-conf though. They played Kansas pretty well, and Kansas is a good team in their own right. This game is taking place in Columbia, Missouri, and this is going to be a noon kickoff happening over in ABC. And as we mentioned, Missouri, they're coming into this contest undefeated, coming off a commanding win a couple of weeks ago. They were on bye last week, but a couple of weeks ago they played UMass, which some of you may consider that also another bye. And they won 42-6. They looked fine, but Missouri, this is going to be their biggest test this year, because Alabama under Kalen DeBoer, they have clearly shown that what happened to them in week number 1, that team is a different team than the team is in front of them right now. And I think that's evident in kind of some of the tests that they've had to endure over the last 2 to 3 weeks, playing against a ranked Georgia team, as well as playing against a ranked Vanderbilt team as well, going on the road for both, well, not both of those games, but, for one of them. And, not only did they win both, but they also covered in both games as well. And I think that's something to certainly be enamored with. Ty Simpson, that dude is a stud. He has certainly shown that what happened also in week number 1, that's not Ty Simpson's fault. And, should honestly be getting a little bit more discussions in terms of the overarching Heisman talk than what is being talked about. He's playing some exceptionally good football over there in Tuscaloosa right now. And the receivers are starting to step up as well. Ryan Williams is continuing to play at a pretty good level, but we have seen Jeremy Bernard really step up and make some big plays with this receiving core. The one thing that still concerns me a little bit is that run defense, and especially in allowing chunk plays, those explosive plays, particularly in the road. Those road concerns maybe have been alleviated a little bit, breaking one of the longer winning streaks at home that Georgia did have over the course of the regular season. But we did see that run defense continue to be an issue, and that was evident in Vanderbilt being able to find a way to get explosive runs, one of them being for a touchdown, and then Diego Pavia did also had a very substantial run upfield. Didn't lead to a touchdown, but it was like a 30-40 yard run. So those issues, I think, still are prevalent, and I don't know if that's something that could be fixed in time, especially for a team that does have a pretty dynamic running game. Missouri does counter with a major running threat, and it's not just Ahmad Hardy, the ULM transfer, who has been electric this year, over 700 yards rushing on the ground. Looked to be one of the shiftier running backs, being able to break tackles and punish defenders in terms of his ability to be elusive. Bo Pribola in particular as well. Bo, was trying to wait his turn at Penn State. Obviously he's never going to overcome Drew Aller, so he transfers. And listen, he's been pretty fun to watch as well. Saw him play a couple of times. He looks pretty good. And not to mention his Missouri team, they also have a solid defense as well. Outside of the like the one game that they played against Kansas, they know how to put teams in a box. This defense, that's a pretty good defense as well. And again, this game is happening at home, and it's going to be an electric environment. So if you're Alabama, I think it's going to be really important for you early on to maybe get those like fast starts are obviously really important. And maybe get some methodical drives in there so that you can quiet down this crowd, and not to mention being efficient on third downs and winning the turnover margin. If Alabama can do both, they're going to be able to leave Columbia with a win. But if the like the turnover margin is in favor of Missouri, or the Tigers are more efficient at third down than what Alabama is, maybe even they get some of those explosive plays on the ground, we could see a world where Missouri does pull the upset off on Alabama. So, with that said, let's pull up the model real quick. And listen, like I did mention, this is going to be one of those games where I think this is going to be the more competitive noon game that features two top 25 teams. FanDuel certainly agrees with me. Right now, FanDuel has it about 3.5 right now, so Alabama favored by a field goal. Model is a tad bit higher at 4.5, but either way, it's going to be a really competitive game. I will say this candidly, that even though Missouri hasn't necessarily been tested, and that also, in addition, they have not had the same resume as Alabama. They come in as the underdog. I do think that Missouri actually matches up really well, particularly with how well they played on the defensive side of the ball. Plus, I actually do think here that Ahmad Hardy can really take advantage of what has been an inconsistent front seven from the Crimson Tide. So, I'm actually going to go on a limb here for this particular top 25 matchup. I'm not going to just disagree with the model and say that Missouri is going to cover this 3.5 point spread. I'm actually going to take it one step further. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to see an upset happen in Columbia, Missouri on Saturday. I think Missouri is going to get a statement win, beat Alabama. It's going to be close. I think it's going to be a 27-24 type game. It's going to be hard fought, 4-quarter game. Be very surprised if this ends up being a blowout in either direction. But I think this is the type of game that we are going to see Missouri get some respect on its name. And I think that when this game is over, we are going to see the field storming ensue within the confines of the SEC. So Missouri is going to get a top 10 win against Alabama. I'm calling it here. Missouri wins 27-24. And they're not just going to win, but they're also covered. And that's one big statement around here. Good teams win, great teams cover. Missouri is going to show that they are a great team this upcoming Saturday. I feel it in my bones. It's certainly not going to be the only competitive game that we do see, though, this Saturday, right? Especially in terms of your competitive matchups. Man, that's not even the biggest game. We've had a couple of really big games. We have a borderline top 10 matchup in the SEC. We have a top 20 matchup. I think it should be a top 15 matchup because Illinois should be a little bit higher. That's not even the biggest game of this weekend. That's how action-packed this weekend has been. But the biggest game this weekend is actually going to be happening in Eugene, Oregon. Number 7, Indiana, is going to be traveling all the way across the country, multiple time zones, to take on number 3, Oregon, in a conference game. Which I hate. I hate that this is a conference game. I'm very excited about this being a matchup, but I hate the fact that this is, in fact, going to be a conference game. I wish this was a non-conference meetup, but, it is what it is. I guess that's the boomer in me. I guess, speaking about this game itself should be very tantalizing and excitement, right? We know what Indiana's been doing. Kurt Cinetti came in there in the spring of 2024 after leading James Madison to a successful year, and he asked the people, I need you to Google me. So I've won everywhere I've gone. And you know what, Kurt Cignetti? He's lived up to his name. This is an undefeated team, ranked top 10 in the country, should be a top 5 team in my opinion. I think this is a top 5 squad. They'll have a chance to prove it though against Oregon, who I do have also ranked in the top 5 in its own right. At least me personally. Now, with that said, Kurt Cignetti has done a fantastic job of finding his transfer quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. And Fernando Mendoza is another one of those guys that should be getting a little bit more love in terms of the Heisman conversation, right? You want to talk about some studs that they have over there in Bloomington, Indiana, right? I mean, Fernando Mendoza, over 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns. They are top 5 in the country in terms of rushing yards per game, and it's one of the best defenses in the entire country as well. Top 10. Really, there's only been a couple of games that they've really struggled in. They did struggle a little bit against Old Dominion, but even with that little bit of a struggle, they still found a way to win by double digits. And Old Dominion is actually better than I think what a lot of people understand. They're not ranked in this top 25, but Old Dominion, they are a legitimate threat to win the Sun Belt. So that's actually... They looked a little shaky at the time, and I did punish Indiana for it back then. But looking back at it, that actually wasn't so bad because Old Dominion's a lot better than expected. They did also struggle a little bit against Iowa. And listen, going into Kinnick, that's not an easy place to win. They found a way to win in a rock fight, and that's the thing with Indiana. They found ways to win in multiple different ways. Also being able to show that they can win in a shootout, putting up 50 plus on Kennesaw State, 73 on Indiana State, putting up 63, most notably against Illinois. They had the bye this week, so if you're going to make a cross-country road trip, this is the perfect time to do it. And they're not just making a cross-country road trip against a conference opponent. That conference opponent just happens to be Oregon, which somehow I think Oregon... They might be better than last year. Is that possible? Because Dante Moore, I think, he is in the midst of a breakout year as well. They have not just Malachi Hughes running the football, but they have legitimately 3 or 4 different running backs besides him that they can go to. The deepest running back room in the country when you're able to play upwards of 3 to 5 guys, and you feel comfortable with playing all of them. That really talks a lot about the depth of this Oregon team. The offensive line that had multiple new starters, they have really came together, and they're playing at a high level. And the defense continues to tighten up, and they are a very good defensive unit in its own right. I mean, this defense, not in the top 5, but the only team that has scored more than 20 points, ironically enough, was Penn State. And they needed multiple overtime periods to do it. In terms of teams that only went to regulation, the next highest is Northwestern at 14. They scored at least 30 points in every single game that they played in. So Oregon doesn't have any top 25 wins on their resume right now, with Penn State falling all the way around. This is a really good team in their own right. So I definitely expect this to be one of those fast-paced games where you see a lot of excitement, and I think it's going to be just a matter of who's going to be able to dictate the tempo a little bit more. Not just winning the turnover battle, but I think tempo in particular is going to be really important. So let's check the model, see what the model is thinking. So Oregon is a 7.5 point favorite as of right now over on FanDuel, while the model is actually a lot higher on Indiana right now. So Indiana's list is only a 3-point underdog on the road in Eugene, Oregon. Now, you actually take a close look at what the model is saying right now. Essentially, what the model is saying is that if this game was happening on a neutral site field, Indiana should be favored. And I think a big reason for that is because, so a little bit of background on the model is that it's an expectation-based model. So if you win by 20 but you are expected to win by 35. You actually do lose points in my model, but let's say you end up only losing by 7, and you were supposed to lose by 21. You can actually gain points in my model, even though you win. It doesn't take a look at win-loss record. It's just it takes a look at what were you supposed to do, or what the model thinks you're supposed to do, and compares it to actual game results. And the difference is how much gain or loss that you have in my model. That's essentially the long story short of it. So Indiana gained a lot of points when they won by 50 plus against Illinois earlier this year. And also, I also don't think that it necessarily wants to go up against Kirk Cincinnati. But as much as I don't want to go up against Kirk Cincinnati, at the same time, this is a team that is going to be making a cross-country road trip to take on a top 5 Oregon team. We've seen this song and dance before, back when Illinois was ranked. We saw them make a cross-country road trip last year against Oregon, and Oregon skull drugs Illinois. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that Indiana is going to have the same thing happen to them. And candidly, I would feel differently about this game if this game was not taking place in Autzen Stadium. But this game is, in fact, taking place in Autzen Stadium. And Indiana is going to have to make this cross-country road trip. And Dan Lanning has a lot of offensive weapons at his disposal. So, all of those things combined, I don't want to doubt Kirk Cincinnati. I really would not be surprised if Indiana comes out of this as a victor. I really don't. But just looking at what Oregon's been doing and, you know, the offensive weapons that Dan Lanning has at his disposal, I just think there's too much firepower for Indiana to be able to find a way to pull it out, even with how good they are defensively. I think they're going to be really stressed, and, you know, we might see this defense get exposed a little bit. That is a thing that could absolutely happen. So, I am going to roll with Oregon. Mainly because of the fact that they're at home and they have the benefit of the road team not having to make a cross-country road trip. It's primarily for those two reasons. I'm going to say Oregon wins, and I'm even going to say that Oregon covers. I think Oregon's going to win 38-27 as your final score. We'll see if that holds up. Would not be surprised at all if Indiana makes it a one-score game, or even if Indiana does win outright. But I have a hard time picking against Oregon. I just don't like the spot for Indiana. Now, if this was in a neutral site, like a hypothetical Big Ten championship game, I would feel a lot differently. It's not, so I'm going with Oregon winning and covering. So you would think after all those noon games and all those free 30 games as well, you would think that all the excitement would be done as the night sky ends up falling. Well, what if I actually told you, even when it gets real dark outside, even when it gets real scary, you know, with all the street lights going on and whatnot, we still have college football being played right in front of our eyes, right? And we are going to have quite the game on our hands for an After Dark special, man. 10:15 Eastern. For those of you that are going to be on the East Coast, featuring two teams that both just recently entered the top 25. Number 22, Arizona State. They are going to make the field trip to Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City, Utah, to take on the Utah Utes. Now, when you guys think about Arizona State, what do you guys think about? You probably haven't given Arizona State too much thought since they had that last second loss to Mississippi State. They fell out of the top 25, I think, shortly after that game happened. Well, this is a team in the midst of conference play and all that has started to find its footing a little bit. This is a team that, you know, has played two quality opponents, a 4-2 Baylor, as well as a 4-1 TCU. Beat both of them. One of them on the road. They were close games, but they found a way to pull it out in close environments. They also played Texas State. And Texas State, I know, not a member of the Big 12, going to be a member of the Pac-12 next year, the rebirthed Pac-12, and beat them pretty convincingly too, 34-15. So they've been under the radar the last month since they lost Mississippi State. But make no sense, they've played against quality opponents, and they definitely earned the right to be ranked once again inside this top 25, coming in ranked number 22 in the nation, and playing in closely, tightly contested games really serves Arizona State extremely well. That could prove dividends as they take on yet another quality team in this Utah squad. And the same could be said about Utah, who fell off the radar just a little bit, right? When's the last time that you probably sat down and lost Utah? Last game you probably watched of them was them losing to Texas Tech, and it was a 34-10 loss. So if you just take a look at the box score, that Utah game looks extremely ugly. But outside of the Utah game, outside of that Texas Tech game, they've been dominant in every game that they played in. They blown out UCLA, for example, which you could say what you want about UCLA. Not everybody can beat UCLA, apparently, so that's something to note. They've also dominated Wyoming on the road, and they've dominated West Virginia. So more of the big question for them is, we're going to figure out almost like a twofold question when it comes to Utah. Can Utah scale upward? Because they were, even though it looks like a blowout against Texas Tech, they were very competitive with them for 3 to 3.5 quarters. It was a very closely, tightly contested game. Texas Tech did end up pulling late, but Utah had a very closely contested game, much closer than what the score indicates. But can they scale upwards playing against top competition? And we're going to find that out from Utah this week against Arizona State. We're going to find that out next week when they go on the road against BYU. That could be another top 25 game that we preview sometime this week. It's just, can they scale up? It will also give us a little bit more insight into Texas Tech, right? Texas Tech, right now, sitting in our top 8, I think they have a real argument to be a top 5 team. You know, did Texas Tech benefit from, maybe it was Utah overrated? Because Texas Tech really hasn't played a ton of competition outside of the confines of their own conference. Houston, looked to be a solid team. But we're going to really see what this Utah team is all about. And, this game is happening at home. So, with that said, we think their offensive line is going to be good. We've seen them play really well. Can they scale it upward? That's going to be the million-dollar question, and what's going to be a night game out in Utah. So, with that said, let's check what the model thinks. Considering we have two teams that have questions that they need to answer, and they both need to revalidate themselves. Right now, Utah, according to FanDuel, is a 5.5-point favorite as I started recording this. Model is a little bit higher. Utah is an 8-point favorite. So, honestly, for me, like in the majority of Big 12 games, it seems like, this is going to be a close game. This is going to be a competitive game. You know what really matters in close games, at least in my opinion? Experience and continuity. We talked about this a lot in the preseason, but Arizona State, they come in back with all of this returning production. But it's not just the fact that this returning production because of like a state, just because of, you don't have to like reinstall the playbook. But Arizona State not only is a more experienced team than Utah, but they have more experience in working together as a team. Whereas, Utah, they had to get a brand new offensive coordinator. They brought in a brand new quarterback. They brought in other pieces. Whereas Arizona didn't have to do that because they had their core starting team back on campus. Which I know it's not the preseason, but why that matters is when it gets really close in the fourth quarter, that experience and continuity and leadership, those more intangible qualities really matter. And when it comes to experience, when it comes to continuity, when it comes to leadership, all those things matter. And Arizona has the edge in all three components, in my opinion. So, candidly, I don't care that this game is happening in Utah, in what's truly an amazing home environment. If you have a chance to go to a Utah home football game, do it. It is a electric environment, and they support their team regardless of how good or bad things get. But I think because of that continuity advantage, because of that experience advantage, and arguably that leadership advantage, I think Arizona State actually finds a way to pull this off. And pull, at least according to the betting markets, an upset. According to our top 25, not so much. I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is I am going to not only say that Arizona State covers against Utah, but I think they actually win outright. I'm going to go with Arizona State winning 31-28. I think that's going to end up being your final score. It will be a really competitive game. Again, if this is a blowout in either direction, I would genuinely be shocked. I think this is going to go down to the fourth quarter. But I think Arizona State finds a way to pull it out at the same time. And I'm going with the Sun Devils winning 31-28. And will be probably one of the last college football games to go final for our Week 7 experience. Which, speaking of that, thank you, by the way, guys, for listening to the entire Week 7 experience. We previewed, all of the major games happening and what is going to be an action-packed weekend. Had to be an action-packed video because of it. So again, I really appreciate you guys sitting through and watching this entire thing. And, guys, if you made it through the entirety of this video, man, I genuinely appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. With that being said, guys, if you made it through this entire time, and if you haven't hit the like button, do it. You clearly enjoy the content if you're sitting around and watching the whole video. But to go off of that, if you want an easier way to get to my content in the future, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. That's a really easy way to do that. And it also only takes you a couple of clicks to do that. And again, I would really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. With that said, guys, on Saturday, we will have the College Football Red Zone live stream. You're going to be watching a lot of these games and reacting real time to what's happening to many of these college football games around the country on Saturday, so you definitely don't want to miss out on that. But in the meantime, I'm going to sign off for right now. This is your host, Jake, of College Football Red Zone. Appreciate you guys watching the entire video. And with that being said, I hope you guys are all out there having a good day or a good night, regardless of when you're watching this. And with that being said, I hope you all take care and take it easy, everybody.